A big thank you to all of you who like, comment, subscribe and share my videos, or through other means support this channel. You are what makes this channel grow and become a resource for other people to learn from. Enough about how awesome you are, back to the video. Welcome back. In this episode we're going to be looking a little bit further into the whole moving cards around part. So for right now we can drag around our card like so, and what we want to now have the ability to do is to sort it in our card hand, move our cards around at different position if we wanted to like mix them around sort of thing. So we'll be creating some more functionality around those events. So to start off with, we'll open up our card widget again. In the graph here, we have events that we can find under function that are called on drag enter. So this event will trigger whenever we drag something over this widget. So in this case it would be that we drag one card over this card. So what we'll do here is we'll create another way of communicating with our card hand. So we'll create another event dispatcher and we'll say that this one is going to be called drag card enter. We will be sending a reference to our card widget, like so, and we'll say that this is called the card dragged over. So important is that this is the card that we're actually hovering above. If we're going to display this, actually let's also do this so you can see when it happens. So if we go a print and we say dragged over, like so, and we could even do an append and say dragged over, and then we can say this should be our card name. We need to break that, of course, and the card name was there. Okay, so now it should be saying dragged over and the card name. It won't be very pretty, but it should get the point across, I think. So we add some cards. Very bad configuration of cards. So we drag the blue card, we get the drag fancy card. So currently it's detecting that we're dragging over ourselves over here. Then we get over here, we get the powerful card, which is the yellow one. We drag over here, we get the fancy card, sweet card, sweet card, sweet card. So you can see that this triggers whenever we start hovering or dragging over with a different card, which is good so we don't have it occurring all the time. For example, the drag on drag over event would be triggering every tick of the game when one dragged widget is over another widget. So yeah, so this will work fine for us. We'll remove this and we'll make sure to call our drag enter over here. Again, we'll make sure to send ourselves as a reference saying that, hey, someone is dragging something above us. In addition to that, we'll also, since we're still doing this, add another function here for on drag leave, which is the same but opposite for this. So we'll create a similar event dispatcher for that, and we'll call this one card drag leave. Add an input, it's going to be able to type card, and we can say that again, it's the card drag over. That's what we called it before. Let's keep that naming convention. We hook it up like so, and we send our self-reference in here. So all of that is good. Now we need to go to our card hand, because we need to now listen to this communication that we're getting. So going to our event graph, we have yet another event to hook into here. So we'll do a bind of card drag enter and reroute that a little bit like so, and we'll also drag out one for the bind card drag leave. So now we have our two possible events that we're sitting listening to. So now we just need to react to these. So we'll start off with the drag enter event here. We'll add that and we'll call this card drag over started. Now we want to do something similar to what we did when we were hovering earlier, when we determined like if the mouse was leaving a card or not, and we were not sure about which order the information would reach us, so we're going to be trying to be a little bit defensive in our code again. So we'll create another function and we'll say it should be called set dragged over card, and it will take as an input a card, widget, object reference. We can call it new card dragged over, let's say. And what we want to do here is we want to say we want to keep track of which card we're dragging over as well. So we want to create a variable here. We'll just promote it to a normal variable and we'll call this currently dragged. Let's call it current card dragged over. So the card that we're currently dragged over, and we just created it this way to have it. We're not actually gonna make use of it right now. But the first thing we want to make sure is that the card that we're dragging over is how to explain this best. We had the situation when I demonstrated that we could actually drag over our own card, because the card that we're dragging and the card in our hand are two separate things. So we could actually start off with doing that. So we can say get new dragged over card, this one, that's our input. Make sure that that is, or we can check if that is going to be equal to, so this the same card as the card that we're currently dragging, so the card that we have with our mouse pointer. So if the card we're dragging over and the card we're currently dragging are the same, then we don't want to consider that as a dragged card. So we can just do a branch, and we can say that the currently dragged over card is going to be blank, because we are dragging over ourselves essentially. So we're gonna disregard that as an option. Other than that, we can also have the situation where the new dragged over card is the same or not as the current dragged over card. So in case the new dragged over card is different than the current dragged over card, then we can say, okay, if it's different, then the new card that we're dragging over is what we're going to be setting as our currently dragged card. This might be a little bit difficult to follow, but essentially like this. Let's visualize it with code, and maybe it's more easy to understand. So we're going to be hooking up like so and saying, so if this is different, then we're saying, okay, we have a new card. So we set the currently dragged card to be the new card that's reporting that I'm being dragged. Okay. So that's all good and fine, like so. And then we can just say return, and we can return here, because if this is the same, then we don't really need to make any changes here essentially. So with this created, which did not go very well apparently. Okay, we haven't added this event. Let's add this event first. Let's do it like so. And we can call this one card drag over stopped. All right, so now that we've created this function, we can make use of it. So we get our set dragged over card and send in the new card that's dragged over. And this will handle making sure it's to settle it properly, right? And in the case when we get a card drag over that stops, we can use the same function, because if we go in here, the card dragged over is going to be nothing. It's going to be initial, which means we will, let's actually see, is that correct? Currently dragged card is going to be this. The currently dragged over card is going to be initial. I think that this is correct. We'll test it out later and make sure that if it's correct or not. For now, just let's take a moment and we can compile and save, and we can go to our play screen and reason a little bit about the logic that we're going to be creating. Because if we have this card, we're dragging it around, and we hover it above this card, the pink one, then we would likely want it to remain at this position. If we moved it to the green card here, we would want it to slide in between the green and the purple card. And the further we go down, if we were to go from here and go over here, we might want to have a representation showing that our transparent card moves over to that position to show that this is where you're about to slot it in, to give the user sort of feedback of what's happening. And to do this, we need to be able to say, well, from this position that we're currently in to any given of these other positions, make sure to traverse that card over there. We can't just like swap it, because then this purple card would end up over here, for example. So what we essentially need to do is we need to have this card move over to that index in the array, essentially. So let's take a look at how we can accomplish this. Go in here, we'll make sure to save everything here as well. Save all, and go to our card hand for now. I've had a change of heart. Since the last part of this edit, I have had a sleep, and I have decided to change things up a little bit. I want to reduce complexity a little bit, because some things are too complex and I wanted to keep it simpler, because modularity and maintaining code is better when you have it in small chunks that are easy to understand. For example, the set over card here is a little bit convoluted, so what we'll do is we'll create a new event or function. We'll call this one handle drag over stopped, not with caps lock, handle drag over stopped. So this will be the event we call on when we decide that we are no longer dragging over a card. We will take as an input for this a card widget object reference, and this will be the dragged over stopped. So what we want to do here is essentially we want to check if this is the same card as the one that we're currently dragging over. Then we want to consider it as it is not a card that we're dragging over. So we'll set our current card dragged over to be, right, we also need a branch in between here. So we'll essentially clear it out if the current card dragged over is this one. To clarify this a little bit, this is the event that's going to be happening when we get this event dispatcher happening, which is when we leave dragging over a card, which means that if we were hovering over this card and now we left this card, we're just making sure that they're the same card in case we get the event from the new card before we get this card. So this is just a making sure that we are clearing out the card if they're coming in the proper order, but if they're not coming in the proper order, we're not. So from here we'll just return, and then we'll put it over here as well. So that's all we do. So we say if the one that we think that we're currently dragging over is saying we're no longer dragged over, we're just going to say, okay, we're no longer dragged over. Then we're going to be calling this function from the card dragged over stopped here instead, like so. I remove this set dragged over card. And the set dragged over, the set dragged over card code was a little bit too complex in my opinion. So what we want to do here is we want to simplify this. And what we have essentially done here is we have cut out this part. So this part is no longer needed. So we'll just remove that and hook it up like so. So now what we're doing is we're just checking if the card we were dragging over is different from the one that we're now getting a report about being dragged over. We'll just update that card to be the new currently dragged over card. So this keeps the code simpler. It's easier to maintain and understand, although it is a little bit confusing for sure. But now it's going to be easier to handle, and having it in two separate methods like this also makes it more clear that, okay, when we're stopping we're doing this, and when we're starting we're doing this. So that's the first part. So now let's add the functionality of being able to hover our card over another card and have those change positions. So to do that, we will create yet another function. We will call this one move dragged card to hovered card, right? So we'll have two inputs for this. First one will be of type widget card, and we'll say this one is the card to move. So that's the card we're dragging around with our mouse. Adding to that, we'll add another reference to our card widgets, and we'll say that this is the destination card. Okay. From here, what we want to do is we want to just check if they are the same card. If they are the one and the same that we're moving and the one we're hovering over, which means that it's the semi-transparent one, we don't really want to do anything. So we'll do this. We'll get card to move. We'll get destination card. We'll check, are they equal? And if they're equal, we're just aborting and returning, right? We don't want to do anything else. Okay. In the other situation where they are different, we want to make sure that our destination card is actually a card that we want to drop it on, because we could be dragging somewhere where we're not having a card, so outside of the actual area of cards. And we need to take into consideration that as well. So what we'll do is we'll get our destination card and check, is this valid? And we'll just do one of these, I guess, because then we don't have to have the branch for it. Okay, so in the case that it is valid, meaning that it's a legit card that we're actually dropping on, we want to do the following. We want to remove the card. Let's show this off. Let's add a few cards. So we have this card over here. We're dragging it around. Let's say we want to place it where the blue card is. So we hover over the blue card. What we want to do is we want to remove the card over here, the ones that to the right, and then we want to insert it near the blue card, either before it or after it, depending on our preference here. So first part is removing this card. So we'll get our card widget reference, and we'll say remove we could do remove item here, like so, and hook it up here, and the card, or the objects that we want to remove is going to be our currently dragged card. That's what we have in our mouse. So now we have removed it. Now we need to put it in the position that it's supposed to be. To do that, we will use an insert. And we will add the card, again, the currently dragged card, into a certain index. Let's do this. So the index we want to insert into, we can create a local variable for. You can call this the local card index to move to. Make it of the type integer and hook it up there. So now we just need to set this to a value. And which value do we want to set it to? Well, it's going to be the value of the card that we are currently hovering over, right? So if we go to our widget reference and we say find, we can put in another widget card reference and we get the card we're currently dragging over and say that that is the index that we want. So with this index, we can just set it to be this value, or rather we can do the other way around. We set the local index to be this value. And then we insert. Okay, so we first remove the card index of the one that we're dragging around, and then we place it into the position of the array where the ones we're currently hovering over is going to be. Then we can almost say that we're done here, but before that we want to go and create another function, because what we're going to be doing is some clearing up here, because if we could probably demonstrate that. We do a return like so, and then we play, and let's have 3 cards. Okay, so we have the green one here, we drag it and we drop it on the blue card. Okay, that didn't work. I have missed something. Let's see if we are missing some part of the logic here. Wait, we're not actually calling this yet, are we? We go to our event graph. That's not our event graph, over here. And we want to call this on, for example, when card drag over start begins, because this is when we're dragging it over a different card, so we're sort of moving it there already, simulating by just dragging. So it looks transparent, but we have already moved it to that position. So if you just let go, that's where it will end up. So let's do that. We'll call this method over here, or this function, and we'll make sure to send in the card to move to be our currently dragged card. And the card that we want to drop it on is, of course, the one that we have set here as our currently dragged over card. So we'll do that. And let's see if this works. We'll add a few cards, and nothing is happening still, but we did see that the card dropped there when I dropped. Now, this is what I wanted to display. You can see that our cards are sort of, well, this card over here is our second card, and this card over here is our third card, but they're not overlapping in the proper sequence anymore. And this is because this one had a sort of, when we add the widgets to the overlay, they get a position in relation to each other, like where they're overlapping. You can see that the fourth one here is actually our third one, because this was our fourth one. So we want to clean this up and make sure that they're in the proper order again. And we'll go and do that by creating another function. And in this function, or first we want to give it a good name, of course. So update widget references. We don't need an input for this, because all we're going to be doing is we're going to take our card widget reference, and we're going to be saying, well, we want to do the overlay. We want to get the overlay. The overlay is where we have our children. So we want to say clear on this. So we clear the children. So all the widgets are removed. Then we use our saved array of widgets and recreate this. So we go through them one at a time from the order of index that they are currently in. And we'll do, let's get the card overlay again, and we'll do add child, like so, and hook in the array element. And then as a completed, we can also do the update card positions to make sure that they're moving into the position they're supposed to be in. So let's see if we drag and drop this again and see what happens. We add a few cards, drag this around, drop it on the red one. It ends up behind the red one, and you can see actually it still has the same ordering problem here, right? Because of course we're not calling on the actual method yet. So let's go to our method over here, update card widget references as a final step after having rearranged the indexes in between them. And we start again, and we go over here, and we want to say we want to drag it. Now you can see that it's updating the position here as well with the transparency. But you can see we can put it farthest to the back here, but we can't put it in the front. And that's something we need to do some custom code for to handle. What we could reason is something like, if we drag a card around, as long as we're over the cards, we'll just do whatever logic we have. But if we drag our card outside of our card hand, but still over our sort of card hand widget, we can make some calculations to see, are we to the right of the hand or to the left of the hand, or at least the central position of it. And then we can say, okay, we're supposed to put it in the last index or the first index or something like that. So we'll do that as well. To do that, however, we need to first go to our actual card hand widget. And in the card hand widget, we need to go down to what's called the visibility. Here you can see it's not hit testable self only. This means that it won't actually process any information like dragging over, for example. We can demonstrate this by going over here and adding the override function for the drag over runs on a tick. We might want to do the drag, and now we'll do the drag over, because we might drag out at some position and then later on move to a different position, so we probably want to do this all the time. Or at least some of the time, and then we can have some limitations to make sure we don't do it all the time. Anyway, we'll do a print string here and say hello if we're actually, this is happening. So if we go now and we create some cards and we drag them out over the card widget, nothing actually, okay, you can see that it's happening as long as I'm dragging above any of the cards. But if I drag outside of the cards, we can see that the hellos go away and nothing happens. That's because this area is not detecting the hits or the movement of that. So if we instead go and say that the card hand itself, the widget, the top widget part here, goes from visibility visible instead of non-hit testable, then that drag event will happen not only when we're over other cards, but it will happen out here as well. So you can see, actually you cannot see, it does not work like that right now. I must have missed something. And we go to our card widget. Oh, I put it on the widget level. We should be putting this, we'll put that back to self only non-hit, and then we go to our card overlay instead. This one is the one we should be setting to visible. Let's try this again. We add a few cards, we drag it out. We can see that it's saying hello consistently when we're outside of here. This allows us to keep track then that when we're moving out here, we can check our position for our mouse cursor as opposed to, or in relation to our center position, to make sure that which side we are on here, essentially. So that's the code that we want to add here. To limit this a little bit, what we can do is we can go and take our current card dragged over, and we check that this is valid. By doing so, we can say that, okay, we only want to make sure to run this logic at all if we're not hovering over a card, because then we'll let the card logic handle that. So that way we'll be limiting this a little bit, which is preferable because this is something that actually runs on tick, and we want to reduce everything that runs on tick as much as possible. From that aspect, we then want to say, okay, well, if it is valid, then we don't want to do anything, we just return. We can say that it is handled, however, and then we copy another return, and then we say on not valid, we want to, what did we call it? Move dragged card to hovered card. So we know we have we don't have a currently dragged over card, which is what this would be, but we can still put it as an input because we will put in logic there that will handle that scenario. And our currently dragged card is of course the card that we want to move. There we go. So now we have that prerequisite handled. So now we will be handling that. So let's add some functionality to actually handle this inside of this method. So inside of here, we still have this situation over here where we don't have a destination card, and we haven't hooked that up yet. So this will just be going to a return for now. But here we want to add the functionality now, which is what we're currently working around, which is when the mouse cursor is dragging something outside of the cards. So we'll create another function to keep things organized and nice. We can call this get card index without destination. And that should explain everything that we're actually trying to accomplish here. What we want to do here is we want to have our mouse position first off. So we go and do get mouse position in viewport. This will give us a structure showing us what our X and Y position is. Can drag that out and break it. What we are interested in is the X position, because that's going to be the one that's in relation to left and right. We wanted to check if this is greater than the middle of our current widget. So to get our current widget, we can of course get a reference to self, and like we did before, we can get our cached geometry, from which we can get our local size, which gives us our X and Y sizes, which we then do a division by 2, just like before. And now we have the center position here. So this we could then break. And then make use of here. Now this will only work, of course, in our case, because we have placed our widget to take up the whole size, length in width. If you were to place the overlay only at a corner, like left or right, then this positioning would not work as it does here. You would have to make a different calculation to get where the card position, the hand card position, is in relation to this. But of course, if you're after doing that, you should probably know where to get that information. Anyway, so now that we know this, we can do a select to give us a few options here, because we want to know either we want to have the first index or the last index, depending on if this is greater or not. So if we drag this over here, we get an index over here for our true or false, and we can right click on false and change the pin to be a integer type. So now we can have a value responding here. So if the mouse position is greater than the middle of the card hand, that means that we want to have the furthest right index, meaning the last index in the card widget reference array. So we'll get that one, get the last index, and we'll have that as our output here. If it is false, however, we won't have the very first index, which is 0. And from here, we're just going to be returning and adding our value index over here. We can call this one something like card index. Okay. And from here, we just need to make use of this function now. So if we go back, we can call on the card index without destination. So now we're going to get an index over here, and we have this local variable we created earlier. Let's see if we can get a hold of it. There we go. And we'll set it to be this one. Now that we have set it, we want to do what we did earlier. We want to first remove our index. So we'll do this copy of this removal part over here. And then we want to insert it. So we'll move this a little bit and hook this up over here, rejoining it with the rest of the code. Something like that. This should hopefully handle this situation. Let's test it out and see how it works. So we add a few cards. We have the yellow card, we drag it to the right, we see that it's to the right, we drag over the red one, we see that it places before the red one, we drag over the yellow one, it places over the yellow one, we drag to the left, it's going to be fine, we move here over to the right, and it jumps to the right. You can see that it doesn't jump if we're dragging up here, and the reason for that is that that's not where the actual overlay is handling or existing, so it doesn't actually handle the drag over event that's happening. But now you can see that we can actually drag this around and place them, the things wherever we want to place them in our card hand. So that's nice and good. So let's recap what we've done in this episode. In this episode, we have in our card hand started handling the situation where, well, first of all, we cleaned up a little bit of our code inside of our drag over and our drag over stop. The events that happen when you move a widget over another widget. Then we also added the ability to move a card from a destination to another destination. So in our case, we're using this to use the move card to go to the hovered card and say we want to move the mouse moving card to this position in our array. We then make sure that we also clean up our widget references to make sure that they have the proper Z order towards the user so that they appear in the same or the depth that we expect them to for the cards. And yeah, that's more or less all that we did in this episode, although it might be a little bit complex and a little bit longer than the other episodes because there's a lot of logic and explaining involved. Anyway, that's going to be all for now. Keep on learning. Take care. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you did not like it, leave a dislike. Leave any suggestions or comments you have down below. Subscribe and share this video if you want to see more like it in the future. That is all for now. Keep on learning. Take care.